Back on track, 3-1. The top line does their job. Eriksson Ek records his 30th goal of the season. But it was the Sharks, a team that had won one game in their previous 18. We'll dive into all the particulars for tonight's game as tonight's Locked On Wild postcast is officially in session, and the doctor will see you now.
You are Locked On Wild Postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to tonight's Locked On Wild postcast as the Minnesota Wild come away with a 3-1 win over the San Jose Sharks, a team that had one win in their last 18 games. And as we'll talk about here in a second, I mean, after the first period, it was a bit of a nail biter until the Ryan Hartman empty netter to finish things off. But let's look at the particulars here, and I'll talk you through them as I pop them on the screen for the YouTube viewers. Minnesota Wild outshot the San Jose Sharks 32-27, but let's key in on this. The Wild had 16 shots in the first period to just one for the San Jose Sharks. So the Sharks outshot the Minnesota Wild over the final two periods, 26-16. Neither team had a power play goal in this one. The Sharks went 0 for 1, Wild 0 for 2. 28-21 in favor of the Sharks on the faceoff dot. And the Sharks also out-hitting the Minnesota Wild 18-10 in this one. And so our wonderful new recap screen that will pop up here for the final few postcasts of the season. And we'll do this all of next year as well. We got to talk about John Hynes' quote at the end of the game because I think it encapsulated exactly what has been an issue for this Wild team throughout the course of the season. John Hynes saying point blank after the game, we can't play the kind of game we want to play. We have to play the kind of game that is required in order to win games. And tonight is a good example of that. The Wilds get out to a 1-0 lead in the first period. Could have likely been more, but Mackenzie Blackwood made some big saves, especially with a couple of scrums in the crease area, and also that weird overturned goal that clearly was a goal, but then the NHL was like, hey, I guess now we can retroactively stop play without blowing the whistle whenever we feel like it. And so you go 1-0 after one. The Sharks dictate the pace for most of the second period, tied up at 1 apiece. Matt Boldy scores 16 seconds in to the third on puck luck for the Minnesota Wild for once. And you end up coming away with a win, but it's indicative of a style of play that has led to problems for the Wild. They played great in that first period. They did everything you would want them to do in that first period, but then they let their foot off the gas. Collectively let their foot off the gas and basically said, said, okay, top line, you do your thing. And continue to do your thing to lead us to a victory. So, I mean, you end up beating a San Jose team that is they're so bad. Like they're just real bad. There's no other way to slice it. But it feels like it shouldn't have been that much of a sweat. And now, like, I found it weird too. Anybody else find it weird how much the broadcast went out of their way to say, well, they didn't have their best stuff tonight, but you can get away with that against the San Jose Sharks. Like, I mean, you shouldn't go into games, I don't think, saying, oh, yeah, we don't have to show up against this team. We can just kind of coast through and come away with the win. It did really feel like they were saving some ammunition for the Vegas game, which is fine. I mean, honestly, that is one that you absolutely have to need, but it's like, I don't know. Let's talk about the positives. Eriksson Ek back in the lineup, reunited what is a legitimate threat line for this Wild team. And he scored his 30th goal of the season here in this one tonight. He became and I don't know why I didn't have the stat up. That would be a very good idea to just have a key stat up and ready while I was getting things going. Eriksson Ek ended up being the 12th 12th player to score 30 goals in a season for the Minnesota Wild in their history. It's happened 19 times, but it's happened by 12 different players. He is also the 5th drafted and developed player for the Wild to hit the 30-goal mark, joining Kirill Kaprizov, Marian Gaborik, Jason Zucker, Matt Boldy, and Eriksson Ek. The full list of players that have had a 30-goal season: Kirill Kaprizov, Eric Stahl, Marian Gaborik, Ryan Hartman, Brian Ralston, Kevin Fiala, Jason Zucker, Zach Parise, Matt Boldy, Jason Pominville, which I completely forgot about. I remember Jason Pominville vividly, but I completely forgot that he had a 30-goal season. And now Eriksson Ek. So that's one of the positives. And he didn't really show any signs of rust. He just stepped in and did everything that Eriksson Ek does. And it just helped kind of shift to the natural order of things for this center depth. I thought we saw Marat Huznadinov kind of carry his line, which is great considering who his line mates are. He had 14 minutes tonight, only had a couple of faceoffs, but had 2 hits, had 2 takeaways, and had a shot on goal as well. So it was great to see him kind of carry his line in this one. So that is another positive here tonight. And Kirill Kaprizov, another multi-point effort. And I got to look here because I'm just looking at the ESPN box score, and it looks like they discredited one of his points. Yeah. Or no, he must have had 78 coming into the game. He had 79 coming into the game. Okay. And so now he's got 80 points and is the only player, or one of the only players, maybe the only player in Wild history to have multi 80-point seasons. So he continues to trend. He's now trending towards a 90-point season. Insane. And so that was a positive. And really, like, the top line being back was great. But beyond that, just a lot of just happy to be here type things, and just more of the same that we've seen throughout the course of this season for this Minnesota Wild team. And also, you're no longer chasing Vegas. You are now chasing the Los Angeles Kings, because the Vegas Golden Knights beat Winnipeg. Kind of wondered if maybe they would, because the Winnipeg Jets have been in a bit of a skid. And now the Los Angeles Kings are the team that you're trailing, and they have 87 points. And so you're 8 points back with 10 games to play. And the Los Angeles Kings have a game in hand. Los Angeles Kings are playing Edmonton. They're currently getting beaten 3-1. So that's the state of where things are at here right now. And so let's get to your comments and questions, because really we didn't learn anything new other than the fact that maybe if by some miracle Murat Kuznetsov gets different line mates, that maybe he's capable of kind of helping push things. He did it tonight with the two of Gaudreau and Johansson as his line mates. I was kind of intrigued by that, the fact that he was able to actually carry that line and do some things. So that's intriguing. That's something to make a mental note of moving forward. But that's kind of my assessment of where we're at with everything. And so we'll come back. We'll take your comments. We'll take your questions as we continue tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. Again, the Minnesota Wilds hang on for a 3-1 win over the San Jose Sharks. Back on track, back in business. We'll be back here on tonight's Locked On Wild postcast after this. Tonight's Locked On Wild postcast is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And during the NCAA tournament, during the madness, during March, you can enjoy busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a #1 seed, it is time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who you think is going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Tonight's Locked On Wild postcast is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your #1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to tonight's Locked On Wild postcast as the Minnesota Wild. That was almost a Freudian slip. The Minnesota Wild win over the. I just got so used to doing these postcasts and having the result be not what any of us are hoping for. The Minnesota Wild beats the San Jose Sharks by a score of 3-1. And we'll now take your comments as we break down this one here tonight. I'm going to start with the first one that popped on screen. Hoptics. According to Russo, there are some rumors about Rossi being moved for the right return. How do we all feel about this? I think it's insane, personally. I think the idea, because let's talk about this. Let's dive into this. Let's hop into this. The reason that it is being discussed as a possibility is because he's really one of the only players that you can move without having to ask, without having to get players' permission to move them. He's one of the only players that isn't tied in to a trade protection that has actual value. Like if we look at this, if we look at the contracts on the books for the Minnesota Wilds, the current contracts that they have that would attract a return that don't have trade protections kicked in. Kirill Kaprizov does not until July. Then his kicks in. Matt Boldy does not have trade protection. Eriksson Ek does not have trade protection. And Marco Rossi does not either. So if you're not going to be able to move Matt Zuccarello, if you're not going to be able to move Marcus Foligno, Freddie Gaudreau, Marcus Johansson, Ryan Hartman, that's about one of the only players that you have of value that would be movable. And here's the reason that it is being discussed is because of Marco Rossi's size. Because to match up against some of these other types of teams that are playoff caliber, you need to have another Joel Eriksson Ek. Every team would love that. But you need to have big centers. And so rather than let Rossi cook and let him develop, because I think it's pretty clear that there is something there that you can build off of at the NHL level, it's doing something to try to win now. It's trying to win now at the expense of winning later, is basically why you would do that, is to try to bring in a veteran that's a center to help you make the postseason now. And there's really no instance in which I can get behind it, which is why I did the episode like a week and a half ago where Alex and I talked about it, and I said it's insane. Like, you are getting a guy who is finally coming into his own. And I say finally, he's in his rookie season. And so if you take what he is doing, and you can build off of that going forward, and you add him in to the mix of Joel Eriksson Ek and Marat Kuznetsov, that's pretty good depth down the middle. But again, it all comes down to trying to win now and trying to get a roster that can win playoff games. So it doesn't make sense to me. And if it's a route that Bill Guerin goes, I am going to throw a temper tantrum on this show. Like, you are going to see a meltdown on this show if that is a route that the GM elects to go. Unless it is part of a package for a bona fide guy, let's say an Elias Pettersson type. If it's in a package like that, there's really nobody on my roster that's off limits for one of those bona fide unicorn type players. But anything below that, I'm not super thrilled by that possibility, because Rossi, again, rookie season, he goes to battle every night. He is routinely the hardest working player on the team. And that is something to build around. So if he gets traded, you're going to see me absolutely lose my mind on this show. So that was a great question to start, Hoptics. Good start. Glad to have you in. And let's fire into a few others. Mike giving us this tasty morsel. 14 of the last 16 Stanley Cup winners have had a top 5 pick on their roster. This is the other part of it too. We started down this road, and you'll be able to see this playlist play out on the Locked On Wild YouTube channel. We're titling it Building a Winner. And we're going to look at how all these other teams have done it. We started with the Dallas Stars, and the Dallas Stars, I think, are a great comparison for where this Minnesota Wild team wants to get to, because they built through the draft and they supplanted that core depth with signings and trades. The next team that we talk about in this similar vein, the Colorado Avalanche, did things a little differently, but they still have top 5 picks on that roster that build up the backbone of that team. You've got Cale Makar. You've got Nathan McKinnon. Don't forget about the likes of Mikko Rantanen either. Now, he wasn't a top 5 pick, but first-round picks that hit is the big thing to keep in mind there. So this is a great nugget because, again, it is setting your, because let's look at it this way too. It's not necessarily like, well, you have to be bad. It's, you are setting everything up. If you are the Chicago Blackhawks and you are bad enough to get Connor Bedard as your number 1 pick, you then are setting your entire franchise up and centering them around that player. And so your timeline for how you win matches up exactly with that player. So the Blackhawks are in year 1 of their process with Bedard. Everything that they do moving forward will be calculated to try to hit at the same time that he hits his prime. All of your prospects and players that you want to have be part of that group all should be in their prime at the same time, is how this is done. And so it's not a coincidence that top 5 players, top 5 picks lead to winning teams, because you see teams build their franchise around those guys. Now, Vegas is obviously a very good example, but Vegas has been trading for, they've been going out and getting guys, top level guys. So Vegas is the example of going and trading for players and bringing them into your core. They went out and they got Jack Eichel. They went out and they got Mark Stone. And so there are exceptions to this bottom out and get a top pick. But Vegas has paid a price for those players. They've given up some good players to go get those guys, but I don't think second guess it for a second because of the fact that they won the cup last year. Point being, elite talent is the way. This is the way. But there is also this side of it too. Some teams have gotten stuck in that vein. Arizona, Columbus, Anaheim, San Jose. Sometimes you drop down and you can't get the car out of neutral. Let's put it at this. The main point, if you're building a contender, the main thing that you need to do is prioritize your top 6. Get your top 6 figured out. Fill it with talent. Fill it with good players. And you can then go find grit. You can find toughness. You can find physicality every trade deadline or in free agency. You can sign those guys to come in and be bottom six guys. The Wild they're in backwards mode right now. They prioritized guys that by and large are bottom six. And the hope is that the Yurovs, the Husnadinovs, the Ugrins, those guys are going to be able to come in and be those top six guys. There's a lot riding on those prospects. Jay, you did not miss Denny's debut. Unfortunately, Denny has been he's having some surgery. Had some surgery this week, and so we had to push off his Sunday debut. We'll keep you posted as to when that will be happening. But no, you did not miss. And just a reminder for everybody, because it's Easter Sunday, no live show this weekend. We'll be back to it the following weekend. Right before, and actually, I think what we'll do, how would this be for a plan? Because that game against Chicago next weekend on Sunday is a 2:30 game in the afternoon, but it's a road game. Might be time for another live stream. We'll chew on that a little bit. We'll chew on that one here. What else do we have here this evening? How does a draft lottery work? As in, who oversees the lottery to make sure it's even for everyone? Well, that's a good question as to if it's legitimate or not. Basically, every team 1 through 16 is thrown into the lottery, and you have certain odds at landing both the number 1 overall pick and odds of moving, to a particular position in the draft. Minnesota Wild right now are at 15. They have 0 chance of getting the number 1 overall pick. They have a 0.5% chance of moving up. And so odds are determined. So here, I should have just scrolled down to the bottom of Tankathon. They explain it in full detail here. So I'll just read through this. All teams missing the playoffs are in the lottery. That's number 1. The teams with the least points get more chances at winning the lottery. The first overall pick is awarded by a drawing of ping pong balls. A team can only jump 10 spots, so only the top 11 teams are eligible for the first pick. If a team in the 12 through 16 range wins the first drawing, the first pick will be awarded to the worst team. The 12 through 16 seed team that won the first drawing is also locked into their new position. A second drawing is held to determine the other lottery winner. Like the first drawing, the second winner can only jump 10 spots, but this time it is using the reseeded order following the first drawing. This second drawing will not affect the teams with locked-in positions from the first drawing. If a 10-spot jump is to a pick that is already locked in, this team will receive the next available pick. Teams are only allowed to improve their positioning via the lottery twice in a 5-year period, beginning with the 2022 lottery. Ties are broken by teams' total number of regulation wins, regulation and non-shootout overtime wins, and then head-to-head if still tied. Playoff teams that did not win their divisions and did not make the conference finals, sorted by points, are assigned the next picks. Playoff teams that won their divisions and did not make the conference final, sorted by points, are assigned the next picks after that. Conference finals losers, sorted by points, are assigned picks 29 and 30. Stanley Cup runner-up is assigned pick 31. Stanley Cup champion is assigned pick 32. So well done by Tankathon, pretty succinctly putting that out there. That was well done to put that out there as to how the draft is determined. So that is that's that. Let's see what else we have here. Wild could put more into developing their prospects, not make the playoff push, and ended up with a better position in the draft. Yeah, I mean, this is the problem again with the win at all costs is you push all the other stuff and you're not going to fully, like, no team will ever fully throw in the towel, but the things that happen because of win at all costs is high minute numbers for key players, rushing players back from injuries to try to get, even if we can even get 60-70% of this particular player, that's better than nothing. And like we saw that with tonight's game, Marcus Foligno out with an undisclosed injury. And like the NHL's just blanket secrecy at injuries is maddening. It's insane. And so the Wild were at one point in the 6th spot in the draft lottery. And now, depending on how things play out, they will probably miss out on those nice defensive prospects unless somebody falls. That would look great in the Wild prospect pool. But it doesn't matter, honestly, who you draft. We're starting to, I think, kind of shift our thought process from the Wild do not draft well. They actually draft really, really well, thanks to Judd Brackett. The big thing is the development side. That has been the area which we have seen some struggle. Now, I think it will be very interesting to see because of the age of all of these defensive prospects that we saw at Iowa, the likes of Kyle Masters, Carson Lambos, Ryan O'Rourke. It will be very interesting to see how those guys bounce back next season, because it is entirely possible that it ended up just being a lot for a 20 or a 21-year-old to take in. Not every player has the same level of hit the ground running success that a Brock Faber does. Not every player lights it up immediately like Matt Boldy does. Just look at Marco Rossi as a great example. He struggled in his first season, which was not his rookie season because he didn't play in enough games. Some of that was due to where he was at in the lineup. Sure. Some of that also was just kind of where he was at in his process. So he went down to Iowa. He worked on a few things, and he has not looked back since. So there's no clear-cut formula for every player as to this is how you get from point A to point B. Some guys get it. Some guys need to be told a zillion times to do particular things. That's just being a 20, 21-year-old. That's how I was when I was that age. That's how a lot of people are at that point. And so it's like the big key is going to be seeing how those guys do next season. Because, if they turn the corner, if they show some signs of improvement, And this is the other thing too. I'm glad this point got brought up because players could also be coming off of like legitimate injuries. And I was not aware that Kyle Masters was dealing with this. And so sometimes it just takes a long time to come back from those types of things. So if we see these players struggle again next season, that's when the alarm bells start to go off. But it just like there just is no concrete bona fide formula as to how to get these players up to the NHL level, because every player is different. And there are some guys, the Wild have had plenty of examples of this, of first round players that they've drafted that just never make it. Like you can have a guy who is a surefire first round talent and just doesn't click, and they just never make it up to the NHL level. It is the entire draft process is you hoping that 31 other teams were wrong, and that you have the right plan to get somebody to the NHL level in your organization. It's basically all it comes down to, is you develop players that you like in your draft process, and you're hoping that you can get them to the NHL level. It's not 100%. It's not a 100% science. You hope to be right more often than you're wrong, but that's just kind of the belly of the beast for drafting, especially. And it seems like it's becoming more and more of a thing that there just are particular situations in which players are able to succeed, and like dysfunction is something that a lot of players just don't have time for. There's very much luck involved in the draft process. It's just about trying to hope that your evaluation is right, and that you going and drafting a player higher than he's projected works out for you. So my big and the development piece is huge. Like I'm not trying to, I hope I don't sound like I'm trying to downplay it at all, but I'm going to be very keen to see how these guys do next season. Now that they've kind of got their feet wet at the Iowa level, I'm going to be very keen to see how they do next year. Apparently, Charlie Stramel is going into the transfer portal like 90 million other college athletes are this season. And this is one of the things, this is one of the roadblocks for Stramel at Wisconsin, was that the former Minnesota State University Mankato head coach Mike Hastings loves to play upperclassmen. So it is entirely possible, if Stramel goes somewhere else, that he has an opportunity to put up better numbers. But he was never a pick that was made with high upside offensively. Like he was drafted for his size and for his combine numbers were off the charts. But the hope, I think, by the Wild was that they can take his frame and help him out offensively and show him the things that he needs to do, but you can't teach that size. And Minnesota Wild, not by accident, are the either smallest or second smallest team in the entire NHL. This was from the Locked On Wild Discord server. Either the smallest or second smallest team in the entirety of the NHL. So they are trying to add more size to the cupboard because there is a lack of it. And it's not something that you like. I think if we're being completely honest, my preference would be, and there are a lot of teams that draft players with size that also have incredible skill. I would rather you mix in the size, physicality guys rather than rely on them to carry your team. And so I will not discount Stramel at this point. I feel way better about Riley Height than I do about Charlie Stramel, but again, every player is different. It could be that Stramel really puts it together here in the next year or two and then ends up coming into the Minnesota Wild organization more promisingly at that point. Time will tell. So yeah, it's just, and I'm going to look into that, I think, for a future episode, because there was an article written that said that size is starting to work its way back into the equation with NHL teams. And so I'll circle back on that. This honestly is why he was taken in the first round, is because the Wild didn't think he would be back there at round 2. Otherwise, if they thought that he was going to be available in the second round, they would have waited. But they didn't think he'd be there, and they were intrigued enough by the size profile to take him. And then Judd Brackett goes and gets Riley Height, who could end up being on the Wild roster next year, at least for a cup of tea. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because if Stramel turns a corner and starts to look like a promising prospect at all, that's a banger of a draft for Judd Brackett. So we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. Obviously, the Minnesota Wild play Vegas on Saturday, and now you are not chasing the Golden Knights anymore, because the Vegas Golden Knights vaulted ahead of the Los Angeles Kings tonight. Los Angeles also, did they officially lose to Edmonton? Yes, looks like they did. 4-1. So the Wild now chasing the Los Angeles Kings, but they're chasing everybody. And so at this point, like, I love this too about the broadcast tonight, is the talk was, well, if the Wild can do 9-2, or in this case, 8-2 in their final 10 games, or maybe 7-3, and you just hope that Los Angeles and Vegas both go about 500. If you go 8-2, you're going to end up with 95 points. And Vegas then would only need 7 points, and the Los Angeles Kings would need 8. So you're basically at that they need about 4 wins. Vegas and Los Angeles need about 4 wins to officially put this thing on ice. Like, you have to win out. You have to win out to put pressure on the teams in front of you if you're going to even have a chance at this thing. And so, this is going to come down to all of the points that were left on the table this year. Slow start at the beginning of the season. that 1-7 stretch, 1-7-1 stretch in January, in which the Wild had everybody on the shelf, even if they get to 4 wins in that stretch instead of just 1, if they get to 4 wins in that stretch instead of 3 points out of 9 games, they're probably in right now. So the theme of this season is just going to be squandered opportunities. And that's not like a rip on anything. That's just the reality of the situation, is that this season is going to be too many squandered opportunities to be able to get to the postseason. And the hope then is that everybody takes the opportunity to kind of step back and evaluate where things are at. And that John Hines quote honestly stuck with me pretty good, is that this Wild team can't come in and play the game that they want to play. They have to play the game that is required of them in order to win these games. Like, if the Wild would have done that from the beginning of the season, we'd be having an entirely different conversation at this point. But there just have been too many points left on the table, too many games in which they have not been ready from the jump and have, as a result, fallen behind. Too many of these opportunities in which they have pulled back in and have said, okay, now all we got to do is go beat a playoff team. And they haven't done it. 2023, 2024 is the year of the missed opportunity. It's really as simple as that. So, regardless of how these final 10 games play out, the reality of the situation here is that the Wilds can, if they win out, get to 99 points. All Vegas needs to, if the Wild win out in the final 10 games that they have, 99 points. All Vegas needs in their final 9 games is 11 points to match that. All the Los Angeles Kings need in their final 10 games is 12 points. So that's the problem. You have to play perfect. The teams in front of you don't. The teams in front of you have built in the possibility for a bit of a slip. You have to play perfect. So we beat Vegas on Saturday, then there is still hope. If we lose, we'll start to transition to hoping Faber gets points to pad his inevitable Calder trophy. We all will. They wasted all of October, November, and most of December. Their fate was sealed back then. Yeah, who'd have thought? Who'd have thought it'd be tough to dig out of a 5-14 hole to start the season? But all of these metrics have reigned true. Like, think about the old adage of the teams that are in playoff position by Thanksgiving are likely to stay there. Oh, I wonder if I can pull up the standings at that point in the season. Stand by. I am perfect. First article. All right. Sportsnet is going to tell us the current standings as of Thanksgiving of this year. Boston was, or we don't care about the, I was going to say, please have the West too. Okay. So standings as of Thanksgiving: Dallas, Colorado, Winnipeg in the Central. Vegas, Vancouver, Los Angeles in the Pacific. Those are your division leaders at that point. And guess what? Your division leaders, Dallas, Colorado, Winnipeg, Vegas, Vancouver, Edmonton, and Vegas. So of the teams in the West, the only differences are in the Pacific, in which Edmonton went from being in a worse position than the Minnesota Wild and got themselves into the top two. St. Louis and Seattle were occupying the wild card spots at that time, but 6 of the 8 playoff spots were basically decided at that point. So it reigns pretty true. Yeah, there was a little bit of movement, but it reigns pretty true. Even all the way back at Thanksgiving. And the Wild they were just not in position at that point to be a playoff team. So just squandered opportunities. Do we think it's going to be a win and in situation for the Wild on the final game of the season? I do not think so, unfortunately, because let's see who the Wild play between now and then. The Wild in their final 10 games, Vegas, Ottawa, Colorado, Winnipeg, Chicago, Colorado, Vegas, San Jose, Los Angeles, and Seattle. And so if you can afford, maybe realistically, you really can't afford a loss the rest of the season. But the Vegas game on Saturday is going to be incredibly tough. The Colorado games, incredibly tough. Winnipeg, incredibly tough. And then you play Vegas one more time. So, like, the music has stopped, and the Wild are not in a chair right now. Musical chairs is over. They're not in a chair. Like, it's just at this point, I think it's just done with, and that's that. I think at this point, I'm going to hit the wrap on tonight's postcast. But again, good conversation here. Tomorrow, we are going to discuss the PWHL a little bit. Alexis Pearson, good friend of mine, who is a broadcaster for the PWHL. And you may remember we have had her on in the past a few times. She'll be joining us tomorrow. So we'll talk a little PWHL with the ladies on a bit of a break here. Kind of get up to speed as to where things are at for the season. So should be some fun for you on tomorrow's episode. And then, of course, we'll have you covered on Saturday with our standard post game as well. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Make sure to hit the like button before you head out here for the night, and make sure to subscribe on both our audio platforms, whether you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or one of the others, or if you are following along with us on YouTube, make sure to follow along so you don't miss out on any Minnesota Wild news and notes throughout the rest of the season. Best wishes to Denny as he continues his road to recovery here, and enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll be back with you with a new episode coming up here tomorrow on Locked On Wild. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.